All right. Hello, Fortinas, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is April 9th, 2026. And as you know, we are watching and praying. We spoke a little bit more about trying to understand this timing of the season that we're in the last teaching with a little bit of an update there. So we know we still I do believe it's April. We've talked a lot about these things and why. And we're not going to go into that detail today. Today, we're going to go into another revelation, a new revelation that when you see it, you're going to say, of course, because it's like it's a mirror of John. Okay, we're going to go into the book of Genesis today, and you'll notice that as we've taught over the years, we've shared this incredible mystery of what we call chapters to years. And we've shown this similarity between the Gospel of John and the first 21 chapters of the book of Genesis. It's really quite uncanny. Now, what they talk about in each of their chapters isn't necessarily the same thing, except for the events in the prophetic. The verse here and the verse there and the conversations going on are in the prophetic. You could see the typologies of the events taking place throughout the first 21 chapters, and specifically chapter 8 through 21 of Genesis, and specifically chapter 8 through 21 of John. You see, remember the book of John? We talked about how in his chapters to years, if you go to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all of the resurrection stories are in the last chapter, except for the Gospel of John. It's in chapter 20, not in chapter 21. And there's a literal prophetic reason for it, which is one of the ways we've been able to prove multiple times that just as the writers of the Gospels and of the epistles of the 66 books were inspired by the Holy Ghost, so were those who gave chapters and verses and the breakdowns and the definitions of words. It was all Holy Spirit led, and we have proven that numerous times. Well, we recently did this again with the book of John a few months ago, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And it was brought to my attention by our brother Jake, things that he had found by saying, well, wait a second. We know there's so many similarities between John's 21 chapters and the first 21 chapters of Genesis. Let me go see if we can see the same type of thing there. And lo and behold, he found some things. He shared it with us in the forum. And it was one of my videos I'd been working on in the background to want to share, put together with you guys and share and show you this incredible thing that, it doesn't matter where we go in scripture. It's always in threes. Pre, mid, post, Luke, Mark, Matthew, 777, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Satan, beast, false prophet. I mean, it's always in threes, right? Third heaven, paradise, and heaven on earth, the millennial reign. It's always in threes. Every single time, it's always in threes. And that's what we're going to see today, in the same type of picture that we did with the Gospel of John. So this one is, it was a leading because of our brother Jake, and we'll see how far it goes. And you look for yourselves, knowing what you know about the revelations, and you see for yourselves if it's the same application, the same picture of three times. So we'll get into that. I'll break it down and I'll explain it. If you're new to Ministry Revealed, you will have already heard things like pre, mid, and post all being true. Me saying Luke, Mark, Matthew instead of Matthew, Mark, Luke for the Synoptic Gospels. To understand more, come to right here, come to this playlist, or you can go to ministryrevealed.com. When you click on ministryrevealed.com, go to the menu, go to intro series, and you can watch the intro series there. It's the first 4 videos in the playlist. And you will have also heard me talk about the forum. So if you'd like to come and join us, you can go from the link in any of the videos in the description box, but also from ministryrevealed.com. You can click on the link for forum. It takes 5-10 seconds to sign up. And it's like-minded brothers and sisters from all over the world that are prophecy seeking, diligently seeking and searching. And it's all about prophecy and watching and praying and sharing Bible studies and all these types of things going on. You could join us in there. It's free. So yeah, come and join us. With that, when you come to this playlist, which you can do at the website or you can go right here, it's this playlist right here you want to come to. Intro to the End Times. When you click on it, this one is going to come up. Let me just pause it. So this is what's going to come up. This is the playlist. It's a big playlist, but we're only talking about the first 4. So every time I started teaching, like 99% of the time, I always talk about this intro series. Because if somebody's new and is first coming to this teaching, it's not really going to make any sense. There is so much depth that has been revealed over the past 8.5 years. Where to try to tell somebody to explain in every single teaching how it came about would be impossible. So what I do at the start of every teaching is I go and recommend these first 4 teachings to absolutely everybody so that anybody who is watching could pause watching this video and go listen to these 4 and move on into any other teaching they want from there. This one right here is a 22-minute intro into what you're about to begin to understand in the next 3. So it just gives you a little bit of laying of the foundation. And then the next one is a 30-minute Bible study. So just another introduction to what we call who the Gospels are speaking to. So within the Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, if you've ever noticed the stories that sound like they're the same story, but the wording is different, sometimes the timing is different. Like in Luke, Jesus going to the cross, like before the cross, he was arrayed in a gorgeous robe, which means white, radiant, beautiful, like a bride's gown. In Mark, he's arrayed in purple, and in Matthew, he's arrayed in scarlet. So what's going on? It's not that the Synoptic Gospels that these guys were colorblind. So what's going on? Why give us 3 different colors? Well, it's all prophetic. And this is going to help you to begin to understand it. You see, it'll show you that the last is first, the first is last. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Synoptic Gospels, in the end becomes Luke, Mark, Matthew. And the reason, the prophetic clue that was being given is the white gorgeous robe means white, radiant, beautiful. Purple and scarlet for Mark and Matthew, all you have to do is go to Revelation 17, and you'll see the woman riding the beast is arrayed in purple and scarlet. So you got a picture of Mark and Matthew being in the tribulation portion. And that is just a snowflake on the tip of the iceberg. You're going to see that all of these differences within the Gospels, within the Synoptic Gospels specifically, is all prophecy. It's going to blow your mind when you see it. From there, you're going to realize that the end of days isn't a focus on Matthew. We've all looked Matthew 24 like it's a broken record, and we would go to Mark or Luke even less and try to fill in the gaps. Well, that's not what's actually happening. The reason their discourses are spoken of differently is because they are all 3 different periods of time. Luke's is a portion called above, which is a period that starts with the escape and then has the pre-trib escape and then has a 50-day period. Then you have Mark's discourse, which is 7 years of seals. Then you have Matthew's discourse, which is 7 years of trumpets. That's what really starts to explode when you realize that the differences in the Gospels are revealing different groups of people. Luke, pre, Mark, mid, Matthew, post. And because we've all been taught from the Gospel of Matthew, everything we've ever understood for generation after generation has only been 7 years of tribulation, 7,000 since creation, with 6,000 and then the 1,000 of millennial reign. When you understand what the truth is in the Revelation, it is going to blow your mind. It's going to mess up your circuits, but once you start to dig in, it'll realign them, and it will blow your mind because it'll go from Genesis to Revelation. These things will open up. And what you'll realize is, as I was mentioning, it's all because of Matthew. Because everybody's foundation, unbeknownst to them, is in the Gospel of Matthew, because they looked at Mark and Luke as just additional info to fill in the details, not realizing they have their own details for a reason. Everybody's gone to the book of Matthew, and unbeknownst to them, as I said, have a focus that only sees 7 years. You see? Well, when you realize Mark comes first and Luke comes before that, you'll realize the end of days is truly a period of 14 years and a short time above. And it's all because of Matthew. So when you come and watch this one's a big one, 2 hours and 43 minutes, because it'll break down and it explains to you how this was missed and what happened and how it reveals and brings it all together. All right? So with that, again, I always recommend that because it is so, so powerful. And I get comments from people, messages, emails from people on a regular basis saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just witnessed that. Okay? It's that powerful. So it's worth every moment of your time. Now, with that being said, time for my sip of coffee, and let's get going. So, as I was talking about in the opener, we have this, what we call chapters to years. Okay? So, if you're new and you heard me talking about the Luke, Mark, Matthew, right? The pre, the mid, the post, you heard me say that Luke's portion is only a period of 50 days, and then Mark's is 7 years of seals, and Matthew's is the 7 years of trumpets. So, what are these 50 days? Well, it's really like looking at a picture like the first 7 years. So, what are these sevens, right? What are the last two sevens of Mark and Matthew? Of Mark and Matthew. Well, they're the last two sets of seven of a 49-year count. You see, we know from Leviticus 25, for a Jubilee, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of seven. So when we talk about the 14th year in this ministry, which is the foundational with the revelation who the Gospels are speaking to, when we're talking about the 14th year, or you may hear us talk about the 21st year in the big picture, it simply means the 49th year. It's the final 49th year in a Jubilee count of 7 times 7. Okay? So the 7 years of seals and the 7 years of trumpets are the last two sets of 7. Okay? And then the 15th year that we call the Jubilee, or in the big picture, we call the 22nd year, is the 50th year Jubilee. Okay? It's important to understand this. And there's a lot more detail in all of it, right? Like if you watch some of those teachings, you'll see a conversation of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, which is the beginning. That was the beginning of the revelation of the 14 years and the period called above. The first group is going to the third heaven. The second group is going to paradise. That's the mid-trib. And the third group is heaven on earth. Okay, that's the millennial reign promise for the Jews. It's wild. Everything comes together. Everything. Well, in what we're talking about today, we have the Gospel of John and we have the book of Genesis. Now, in the book of Genesis and the Gospel of John, Genesis has 50 chapters, of course, not 21 like John. But we found this mystery within the Gospel of John, and then, this was many, many years ago, we found the exact same typology of the first 21 chapters of Genesis as a prophetic picture of the end of days built within it. And we call this our chapters to years. You can see it in Hosea and Zechariah. By the way, Hosea and Zechariah are the only two books in the entire Bible that, wouldn't you know it, have 14 chapters. When I first discovered that back in early 2018, I was freaking out. Soon as I saw one, I went to go look at the other, and I started looking through the list of 66 books, and I saw that they were the only ones. And Hosea is to the Gentiles, right? Is the house of Israel with the Gentiles grafted in, and Zechariah is to Judah. It was mind-blowing to find out that they each had 14 chapters. And wouldn't you know it, there were events laid out within them that are absolutely prophetic to the end of days. So much so that if you go to Zechariah chapter 14, at the beginning of the chapter, like the beginning of the 7th year of trumpets, at the sounding of the trumpet, the mystery of the Lord, it says, is finished in Revelation chapter 10, and in Revelation chapter 11 at the 7th trumpet, as soon as it begins to sound. And what do we know happens at that point? The return of the Lord, feet down on the Mount of Olives, exactly what you read right near the beginning of Zechariah chapter 14. It's crazy. Okay? It's absolutely bananas. And this, we're going to be talking about this period of time, this beginning time, this middle time, and this end time today. But we've already done it recently with the book of John, and today we're going to do it with the book of Genesis. So in the past, we broke down, we've got videos on John's chapters to years. We have videos that teach Genesis's chapters to years in the prophetic, which has a focus from chapter 8 and chapter 8 to chapter 21 to chapter 21. You see, wouldn't you know it? Watch this. Do you know that in chapter 21 of the book of John, I think it's verse 14, Jesus says this is the third time he came to them. Well, wouldn't you know? Pre, mid, post. That would be the third time. Remember I told you everything's in threes? Do you know what it says in Genesis chapter 21? Ishmael is born. Sorry, not Ishmael. Cancel that. Isaac is born. Abraham was 86. He had his first kid. God makes a covenant after 13 years. And then in Genesis 21, the promise, and Isaac, Christ is a picture, a prophetic picture of Isaac. And where was it? The promise came in chapter 21. You see, that's what we're talking about. And we could do it through all of these books and within all of these chapters. In fact, let me show you one in John chapter 8 to Genesis chapter 8. So remember, in John chapter 8, we have this prophetic picture of the beginning of the 14 years. That starts with the pre-trib. And then what do we get in verse 12? Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. Now, for those that have been following for a while, you know this very well. We've got a teaching not too long ago, within the past year, that goes into all of these places where he talks about him being the light in the darkness. And we could show that prophetically in those places where he talks about it, or where it's talked about him, it's directly related to the revelation of the end of days, when he comes as the white horse rider, the Son of Man coming as the white horse rider to warn, as Jonah did for 40 days. This is the Lord coming. The pre-trib happens. At the end of the pre-trib, after the 1 week wedding, he is coming on the 8th day to begin the 40 days of the Son of Man. Okay? He is the light shining in the darkness, and it represents the 40 days of the Son of Man. Well, you recall now, if we go to this timing typology in John chapter 8, looking from Genesis chapter 8, so if we go from chapter 1 to chapter 21 of Genesis, we've got this big picture imagery. And what do we have? In verse 6, and it came to pass at the end of 40 days. So what is this picture here of this end of 40 days? It's a picture of the Son of Man having been here for 40 days, the 40 days coming to an end, the raven, Antichrist, the beast spirit going out, then the dove at the 50th day. You see, remember, 7-day wedding, 40 days of the Son of Man, then the raven, the Antichrist spirit, then the dove goes out, the anointing of what we call Acts 2.0, and then the 14 years begin. Okay, so here it is, the end of 40 days. You got the same picture, which is when the Lord comes in the prophetic as the light in the world. We can even take it to Genesis 1, because there's a picture of Genesis 1 to Genesis 2 and so forth, right? So we've understood this, and we end up with this same picture, chapter 8 and chapter 8. But that's things that we've taught on, right? We've broken this down in their chapters to years in numerous ways and in different portions. So many things, because the other thing to remember is it's not just, we can take these things within the wording in the verses that are revealing things within the end of days, in the chapters to the years of the end of days. It's not only that, but within the chapters themselves, sometimes you can get a whole story of the end of days, right? Like we said a moment ago, you can go to Abraham in chapter 16 and Ishmael's born. You can go to chapter 17 and 13 years later, God makes a covenant with them. And then you go to chapter 21 and the promise, who is Isaac, shows up at the 14th year when Abraham is 100, and it all started when he was 86. So you got this picture within these 3 chapters and just a few chapters right here, giving you a picture of the whole 14 years. You see, it's layered and layered and layered and layered. It's incredible. Okay? So in one that we talked about not too long ago, right here, let me just make sure I pause. There we go. This one right here, Incredible Gospel Fractal. Okay, this was from October 16th, 2025. This is what I'm talking about. This is what we're going to look at here today, but not from a John gospel picture, but from a Genesis picture. So if you recall in that teaching, it was these 3 chapters right here, 5, 6, and 7 in the Gospel of John. And what it revealed, I mean, you guys are going to want to go watch it yourselves if you haven't, okay? But what it reveals was pretty darn wild, okay? Because it starts with John chapter 5, and it says there was a feast of the Jews. And then you see that it was connected to a group of people waiting for the moving of water. Then you see they went down for the pool and troubled the water. And then you see first after the troubling of the water, this is pretty wild, right? Because if you followed what's been taught here, you know that the connection with the pre-trib is water, water, water. There's a lot of things connected to water. In fact, if we go to Genesis chapter 1, you'll see this connection to the water that we talk about a lot, okay? In verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, we've shown and have broken this down and connected this with the waters many times, and Reuben and so forth, and all of these things that it means in this connection to the pre-trib group. Well, then what happens? Then it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Well, who is this light? What is this light? It is not the Son. This is when God the Father made Christ, who was Spirit, he now made him light. And what happened? In verse 5, called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So what do you got here? There's your picture of Christ coming for 40 days. When does this happen? After the waters. You see that? So we're getting this picture, right? So what do we have here? We have a Jews' feast, and it was this connection to water. But what is this mystery feast? Okay? After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Well, which feast is it? People have debated, and there's always reason for debates on anything. But we can show you that in the prophetic, this is that feast that people know, but never has a specific count to get to it. And it's the Feast of Weeks. What do we know about the Feast of Weeks? We know that the pre-trib is the group connected to the Feast of Weeks, right? Well, when you go to chapter 6 of of John, you end up with what? So you had the Feast of Weeks, which is connected to the pre-trib. Well, we know that the mid-trib is connected to the Passover. And look at what it says in chapter 6 of John. A great multitude followed him. So now you've got this great multitude that followed him because of the miracles. And when was it? Well, listen to the storyline. It was a great multitude that followed him. So the mid-trib great multitude, there they are. They're following him, and Jesus went up into a mountain. Well, when he comes at the end of the 6th year of seals, he's coming on heavenly Mount Zion, the great mountain, the stone that becomes a great mountain. And when he gathers them, when is it going to be? Passover. See how that works? It's absolutely wild. This is literally a picture of the end of the 6th year of seals to that start of the 7th year, that real 7th year of seals time frame. It's so incredible the way it plays out. And what do you know? The second feast that will play out in the end of days, connected to the mid-trib great multitude, is Passover. And then what happened in John chapter 7? In John chapter 7, look what comes next. The Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. The Jews' Feast of Tabernacles, which relates to the 7 years of trumpets and the Lord returning feet down at that 7th year of trumpets, destroying all of the enemies, and then the final Jubilee at the end, which is called the 8th day of Tabernacles, the great 8th day. It's absolutely incredible, okay? And we know this, we've taught on this, we've broken this down often from the book of Deuteronomy chapter 16. These are the 3 main feasts of the Lord where men aren't allowed to show up empty-handed to the Lord. Passover, Feast of Weeks, and Tabernacles. We know Feast of Weeks is going to be observed first. And what did we just see in John? The Feast of Weeks, that mystery feast, because of its count, is a feast of the Jews was at hand. Not mentioned, but we know it's the Feast of Weeks because of the revelation. Then what happens? Well, then it's the Passover week. And the week of Passover, which is unleavened bread, is 6 days and then the seventh. That's the 6 years of seals, and then the seventh year, which is the solemn assembly. And then what is it? Well, then you've got Tabernacles. It's the 7 days of Tabernacles. But the solemn assembly isn't until the great 8th day, which is the Jubilee, when he will gather them back from the wilderness that they flew into at mid-trumpets. It's perfectly aligned with the revelation. That's why that teaching with John 5, 6, 7 was so it was wild. Just to see how that played out like that was absolutely incredible. Well, with that, as I said, if John and Genesis have so many of these similarities all the way through, then Jake's thought was, well, what if we go to Genesis chapter 5, 6, and 7 and see if there's comparisons to, not necessarily, but maybe, right? Pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib. Now you have to remember, what is pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib about? Well, those are a taking, and a return of the Lord. Okay? So it's the pre-trib, those who are in Christ, spirit-filled, diligently seeking and searching, watching and praying, like Luke 21:36, watch ye therefore and pray always, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Okay? Well, what's the other thing we know? We know that if you go to Hebrews chapter 11, we have the story of Enoch. And Enoch knows that the diligently seeking will be rewarded in the Lord, right? Well, again, it's connected to Enoch. And if you know who Enoch is connected to, or the feast that he's connected to, then it all makes sense. And these aren't anything new. We've taught about these things, right? So we're going to see whether these, what we just saw in John's, you saw that it was the three feasts. So the three feasts do have connections to pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib, but they're also a picture of, yes, the pre-trib, but then what? 7 days as 7 years of seals, 7 days as 7 years of trumpets. Okay? So it was kind of multi-layered in what it was revealing in having those feasts, one after the other, starting each chapter. So in Genesis, are we going to see the feasts that are, is it going to be something that's just relating directly to a pre-trib and then mid-trib and then post-trib, or is there going to be events that relate to those seasons and times as we've understood? Okay? Here's what I mean by this. When we went through the Gospel of John in the chapters to years, every single piece that we see that's prophetic isn't the same story that's talked about in Genesis. But the events being discussed, we know through the revelation of prophecy, are the events taking place at that same time. Let me give you an example. This is a great one I love to talk about. In John chapter 14, which in the chapters to years equals the 7th year of seals. What is the 7th year of seals? Well, the Lord has returned with heavenly Mount Zion. He has come with a mountain carved without hand. It's become a great mountain. That is paradise, the place he went to prepare. And he's receiving the mid-trib great multitude there at the time of Passover. You see, that's what we just covered, right? Well, guess what John chapter 14 says? I go and prepare a place for you, that if I go and prepare a place in my Father's house, that if I go and prepare a place, I will return and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. You see, that's not him returning feet down on the Mount of Olives. That's literally him coming with paradise, the place prepared, which is exactly what happens at the start of the 7th year of seals. It's pretty crazy. Okay? So it's the same picture, but when you come to Genesis chapter 14, you don't have a story of this of a mid-trib, him coming with the mountain with the place prepared. what you have is a picture of a conversation of Melchizedek. The very first time the conversation of Melchizedek shows up is in Genesis chapter 14. Now, why does that matter? Because when the Lord comes at the start of the seventh year of seals, he is coming as high priest and king. He is coming as Melchizedek, as the high priest king from the tribe of Ephraim. It's directly in association with it, who he's coming as and what he's coming with. But you see, it's not the same story as to what he's coming with and gathering the people. It's a story that explains more about him and his timing and who he's coming as. But we know this and we understood this because of the revelation of prophecies over the years. We understood that this timing is directly related to him coming at the end of the 6th year of seals. We know that this is directly related to him coming with heavenly Mount Zion to receive the great multitude. You see? So we know that the timing of the events are related and in their chapters to years. Okay? So when we did it with 5, 6, and 7 with the Gospel of John and saw the 3 feasts, it was a no-brainer. It was so clear, it was wild. So when we come now to Genesis, we need to see, it doesn't mean it has to be the exact same things as we saw in John, but it definitely has to be related events that we've understood will take place connected to the beginning pre-trib group people, and then something mid-trib related to his coming at around mid. Okay? Doesn't have to be a taking of people, but it could be a relation to something about him. You see? Just like this was a relation to about him when he comes, and this was like the rapture group that will go to that place prepared. And then chapter 7 being a relation to something that is post-trib. Okay? When he returns feet down. Something he may do when he returns feet down. Something that's going to take place during that period of time. Well, watch this. Watch this. We're going to go now to Genesis chapter 5. Okay? Genesis chapter 5. So this should have a connection to pre-trib. So just as John chapter 5, we were able to prove that it was related to the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Weeks is going to be the first feast. Watch this. This is so much fun. Okay? Watch this. And why does this always work? John and Genesis just have this connection in their 21 chapters, but remember, everything is also in threes. 5, 6, 7. We're going to go 5, 6, 7. Okay? It's always in threes. It's crazy. Okay? So let's go to Genesis chapter 5, and let's see what we find. And of course, anybody who knows what's in Genesis chapter 5 is probably already screaming, yes, go to it, Alan. We know who's there. You guessed it. Enoch. Enoch, brothers and sisters. Enoch was the first person to not taste of death. Right? Enoch was the first to have never tasted of death. And for those of you who have been following for a while, you know this very well. It says, by faith, in Hebrews 11, by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him before. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is God, and that he is, here it is, a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. What is this reward for diligently seeking him? Translated, not seeing a death. Okay, this is in the prophetic. This is the beginning of the end of days. Enoch is the prophetic picture of the pre-trib vanishing of the end of days. And lo and behold, in Genesis chapter 5, we get Enoch. Enoch, who was walking with God and vanishes. Funny how that works, right? John chapter 5 was this mystery feast, which we know is the Feast of Weeks, the one that represents the pre-trib. Well, you see, and this is what we talked about in John chapter 5, right? That mystery feast and water, all connected to this pre-trib group. Well, for those of you who don't know this, Enoch was translated at the Feast of Weeks. It's believed through Now it's not written in scripture, but this is passed down through generations, hundreds and thousands of years through the Jewish people and the rabbis and so forth, and they believe that he was born at the Feast of Weeks and was taken at the Feast of Weeks, which actually makes a lot of sense too, because we have this picture of 365. Okay, so he was 365 years old when God took him, and we have 365 days as years. You see what's going on? And this is why I believe there's this connection to it, which when this time has to be counted back, because this would represent the beginning. I don't want to go down that, but those who have been following for a little bit and remember the whole 2 months off in this count that we're talking about, right? This if 365 day is years, but it's a picture of days, well then to us that would be the start and the end of the year, and that used to be in Taurus, correct? But for what we're talking about here today, it's Enoch. And Enoch has always been the revelation of the pre-trib. It's revealed right here as we've taught it for years in Hebrews chapter 11. And we know throughout history, what's been passed down in Jewish tradition is that Enoch was born and taken at the Feast of Weeks. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. The pre-trib is connected to the Feast of Weeks, right? Just like we were saying in Deuteronomy 16, and we've been teaching in Deuteronomy 16 for a couple 3 years now. These three feasts, I often say certain teachings just had me in awe, and there's so many of them. But when Deuteronomy 16 was revealed, I mean, it still just has me shaking my head thinking, it's crazy. It's absolutely bananas to receive, to understand what this is all about, what this is prophetically revealing to us in the end of days. It could never happen without first understanding the revelation of who the Gospels are speaking to and the 14 years. It's absolutely crazy. But when you understand it, because you've got the Gospels, because you've got the years, all of these things open up. All of these things open up. And here we are again with the confirmation, just like John's feast, that mystery feast. Here we are in Genesis chapter 5, and that mystery feast being confirmed in Enoch, which is the Feast of Weeks, being taken by God, never having tasted of death. Check. There's the first box. What happens now if we go to Genesis chapter 6? Well, in Genesis chapter 6 is where we get into a very sensitive window. So if you're new to the ministry, you might want to stop watching because of what we're going to get into. But in a future video, God willing, the next one, we're going to talk more about the Lord's final covenant, okay, or this last covenant that's coming. And wouldn't you know it, it's in Genesis chapter 6. The covenant is in Genesis chapter 6, and what do we know it relates to? What happens at the seventh seal? That silence in heaven for half an hour. We have taught on this numerous times that it relates to the Lord making a covenant with all people. What do we know? Look at what it says. If we go briefly, we're going to go into other places of it, but if we go into Zechariah, 14 chapters, we go into Zechariah chapter 11, which is in about 10 and a half years into the tribulation, okay, about 3.5 years into tribulation. What did it say when the covenant is broken? Okay, when it said in verse 10, and I took my staff, even beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant, which I made with what? All people. Now, it's not the Lord breaking the covenant. It's the events that led to all of this people rebelling, that they were the ones that caused the covenant to be broken. But look at what it says. That he made with all people. That is a prophetic picture of the covenant that the Lord makes at the end of seals in that seventh year at the seventh seal. He is making a covenant at the end of seals. Remember what happens in in Revelation chapter 6. I like sharing on this one because a lot of people just don't really grasp what it means. When you see what's happening at the end of the sixth seal, which is the end of the sixth year of seals, not that it's necessarily 1 year per seal, it just lines up that the end of the sixth year of seals is the end of the sixth seal. And look at what we see. Starting in verse 15. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said unto the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? What are they looking at? Right? What are they seeing that is freaking them out so much that they're running into the caves of mountains and into holes in the earth to go and hide themselves from the wrath of the Lamb? Obviously, they're seeing something come. You see, it's obviously being seen from above, and they're seeing it and they're freaking out. You see? This is the Lord coming at like Daniel chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2, when that mountain carved, that stone carved without hand, that becomes a great mountain. That is the Lord coming with the place prepared, which is paradise. This is what they're seeing here. This is what's freaking everybody out. Okay? And so you could imagine what it's going to be like at the end, at that end of that sixth year of seals. Whatever this is, this mountain-looking, ship-maybe looking thing, I don't know. When it manifests in the physical realm, that it's going to freak people out. The Lord is going to defeat the beast and the 10 kings that are with him. He's then going to seal the 144,000. The mid-trib great multitude will take place. You notice what's happening? It's not a conversation here of the mid-trib great multitude. Just like I said, it's not going to mirror the exact same thing going on, but it's going to be an event related to something happening in that time. And so what do we know is happening at this time? The covenant. So because of all the chaos and then him defeating the beast and the 10 kings that are with him, then the 144,000 are sealed. The great multitude comes in. Then in the seventh year, about the second half of the seventh year of seals, the Lord is going to make a covenant with all people. And heavenly Mount Zion is going to be there above Jerusalem. You see it right here in Zechariah chapter 8, which is prophetically a picture of the start of trumpet judgments. And it says right here, Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. You see? Did you see how crazy it was when we went to John chapter 6? Remember, what are we talking about? The mountain of the Lord, right? What did it say? A great multitude followed him. And where did Jesus go? And Jesus went up into a mountain. Hello. You seeing the prophetic pictures? It's absolutely wild. And so we know at this point, once he defeats them, seals the 144, gathers the great multitude, then he's going to establish this new covenant. Okay? There is another covenant coming. We've shown this, we've proven it numerous times and in many ways. And watch this. Do you know that this word covenant, the very first time it's used in Scripture is right there? So 284 times in 264 verses, and the very first place it's used is in Genesis chapter 6. Funny how it works, right? Funny how it just happens. Exactly an event that we know takes place in that seventh year, in that mid-portion timing at the coming of the Lord, not post-trib, but mid-trib. It's wild, okay? So where else do we see this? For those that have been following for a bit, you know this also very well. In Jeremiah chapter 31, many people have tried to somehow explain this as the Lord having done this already. But all we have to do is read what it talks about, right? So in chapter 8, of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 31, starting in verse 8, one that we've talked on and taught on many times. It says, "Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and will gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child together. A great company shall return thither." And then it says, "They shall come with weeping and with supplications, and I will lead them, and will cause them to walk by rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn." Well, why is this such a big deal? Ephraim is my firstborn. Why throw that in there? Because you know exactly what it is, right? If you're newer, you don't know, but it relates to the coming of the Lord at the end of the 6th year of seals. Okay, remember the first one? It's connected to water. You got that connection to Reuben, the man with the pitcher of water. And then you've got what? Ephraim, who relates to the ox. His banner is the ox. And he's going to be here until the end of trumpets now, from Mount Zion, until something happens. It's Ephraim, the Messiah ben Ephraim that we've often talked about. And look at what it says. "Hear the word of the Lord, O you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather them and keep them, as a shepherd does his flock." Who is the shepherd of the flock? The Lord is. The Lord is coming what? As high priest and king from the tribe of Ephraim. Remember, he's coming as Melchizedek. So you see that connection? You've got chapter 14. You see how crazy this is? Okay. You see these connections? We showed chapter 14 of John when he's coming with heavenly Mount Zion to gather them to the place he went to prepare. In chapter 14, we show that he's coming. It's the first time you have the conversation of Melchizedek, who is high priest and king. When he comes, he is coming as Messiah ben Ephraim, who is the high priest and king. You see? And then you go to John chapter 7 in John chapter 6 in this relation of the three, and you see the connection of Passover and a great multitude following him to the mountain, following up the mountain. And then you come over here in chapter 6 and you see the connection to him establishing his covenant. You see what happens when you understand the 3 times, the pre, the mid, the post, the Luke, Mark, Matthew, the above portion, the 14 years? It's everywhere. You see it in everything. So we just talked about this one. We talked about this one. We talked about this one. We just connected it with this one. And all of them are a picture of the mid. In the three, in the big picture, It's so wild. When these types of things are seen, it just gets crazier and crazier. You just think, oh, there's no way. That just sounds like you're making stuff up. Oh, now you're going to pick 3 random chapters? No. Remember, we are not picking 3 random chapters, because it's chapter 8 through 21 where the core of the revelation of the end of days is. Okay? It's Genesis 8 through 21, which is the core of the revelation of the end of days. So what do we see in John 1 through 7 and Genesis 1 through 7? We're not given details that relate to things in the last 7 years leading up to it. You see, the real revelation doesn't begin till chapter 8 and downwards. So then what can we find? What other details are in these? And that's where Jake brought these up. He noticed them, went into them, and then we shared them and went deeper in them. It was incredible. But you can't find these things without first understanding the differences in the Gospels, the revelation of the years, and that everything happens in threes. Right? When you understand the 3 different feasts, you'll understand why there's the mystery feast, Passover, and Tabernacles. Because it's the revelation of Deuteronomy 16. But that Feast of Weeks is first. And then what do we find? Bang! Enoch first. It's so crazy, right? And then the Lord coming, and after he gathers them and does all these things, then he will establish his covenant. Okay? So look at what we saw. We know that what's happening next is the establishing of the covenant at his coming at mid-trib. But what do we know happens first? We know that he's coming with heavenly Mount Zion. We know that the great multitude is going to follow him up to heavenly Mount Zion. That's that prophetic picture of the mid-trib great multitude. And it will be at the time of Passover. Well, what are we reading here? We're seeing that the Lord is now going to be gathering them from the ends of the earth, a great company. But where does it say at Passover? If you've been around for a while, you know what this is, right? If you go into the Septuagint Bible translation of Jeremiah 31, it says, "Behold, I bring them from the north and will gather them from the ends of the earth to the feast of Passover, and the people shall beget a great multitude, and they shall return thither." When does it say? At the feast of Passover. Wait, what's the second feast? What's the second feast in the prophetic of the end of days? It's Passover. And John went, great multitude, followed him up the mountain, which is the mountain of the Lord, heavenly Mount Zion, and it's Passover. So what happens if you follow what takes place after this? Great multitude, Passover, the mountain of the Lord, okay? Great multitude, Passover, it's the mountain of the Lord because he's going to gather them back. What happens next? Let's go further down in Jeremiah 31. Let's see what happens next. Jeremiah 31, verse 31. "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant." You see that? When people try to explain this in Jeremiah 31, they try to explain it as something that Jesus somehow fulfilled when he came the first time. Yet earlier in the chapter, it says that he's going to gather a great multitude from the coasts of the earth and gather them back and do so with his son, his firstborn, who is Ephraim, who is going to gather them as a shepherd does his flock. Did that happen yet? No. No, it did not. You see? And that's the confusion that comes from the church. They only see 7 years. They don't understand the true revelation of prophecy. They can't understand why the Jews believe there is a Messiah ben Joseph and a Messiah ben David. They try to say, no, that's Christ. He already died for our sins. He already did this. And the Jews are like, no, there's all these prophecies he hasn't fulfilled yet. So that's not the guy we're looking for. Though it is the guy they're looking for, but it's when he comes in another form. When he comes as Messiah ben Joseph / Messiah ben Ephraim, means the same thing. You see, the church can't reconcile it, and the Jews can't reconcile it. But we've been given the revelation to reconcile them together perfectly in the revelation of the Gospels in the 14 years. So, what did we see again? We saw a great multitude, Passover, gathered, going up the mountain, and then, what do we get? A new covenant. Well, that follows exactly going from the end of the 6th year of seals, the Lord coming with heavenly Mount Zion, the 144 sealed. Then you've got the great multitude that will go to the place that he came, that he prepared them for, which is paradise, which is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the second one, when the second group, kind of sort of in Christ, not like the first, they will go to paradise. And then what happens after that? Well, then you go to Revelation chapter 8. And in Revelation chapter 8, you have the 7th seal. And there's silence in heaven for half an hour. I believe that at least one portion of that period of time has to do with the new covenant, the covenant that he will have made with all people. Remember, this is why I was explaining what happens at the end of the 6th seal. At that end of the 6th year, when they see him coming, they're so freaked out. They're going into the rocks and mountains and hide us, right? Because of what they're seeing. So when the Lord destroys the enemy and the 10 kings that are with him, which is that first battle that we get in Revelation chapter 17, when he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings in lowercase, except one uppercase L, one uppercase K, what ends up happening is the world is going to be like, oh, okay. You see? And so what is he going to do? He now will make a new covenant with them. This is the covenant that the Jews have been waiting for. This is when the Gentile age is now over. You see, the Gentile age is over at the end of seals. And now what? Now the Lord, it says, exactly in the same order that we know happens. He then, at the end, after the great multitude, after all that, then comes the covenant. And all you did was continue reading down from what took place earlier in Jeremiah 31. So in Jeremiah 31, starting at verse 31, behold, the days are coming, saith the or the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Going to try and tell me this happened already? You can try, but I'm not going to believe you. You see? Then I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Well, did they all come to him? No. Right? They didn't all come to him. Are they going to at the end of seals? Of course they are. You see, because in their prophecies, they know the things that haven't been fulfilled. They're waiting for these prophecies yet to be fulfilled, and they're going to recognize it when the Lord comes and destroys the beast and all those that came against them, when he destroys the beast and the 10 kings at the end of seals. And then what's going to happen? There's going to be the declaration to rebuild the temple. Hello? So in this declaration to rebuild the temple, these are the things that the Jews are waiting for. Unfortunately for them, they think it's what starts in a 7-year period too, unaware that there's a 7-year period that comes first. And this is why the Christians say that the Jews are going to fall for the Antichrist. This is why the Christians believe, many of them, that the Antichrist is going to be Jewish. Because the Jews, they believe, are going to fall for the Antichrist. They're not. They're not. Now, there's another story to those that say they are Jews and are not, and those guys are part of the enemy. But the overall of Jews and of Israel, no. They're not going to fall for some Arab. Okay? He's not going to be Jewish. So here we have this covenant. This is a covenant clearly being made at the end of seals. Clearly happening after the mid-trib great multitude. That happens at Passover. So you seeing how it all falls in line? John, Feast of Weeks. Enoch, Feast of Weeks. John 6, Passover, Mountain of the Lord. Right? Following them up. And here we are, a covenant that has the mid-trib great multitude, the following up the mountain at Passover, and then the new covenant, which is an alignment to what? To the seventh seal. The seventh seal and the time of silence in heaven. Things have settled down. He makes a new covenant with all the people, and trumpets then begin. Okay? That's what happens. And here's the thing now. For those that aren't aware of this, it's an obviously very touchy subject, because what happens is when a covenant is made, there has to be the shedding of blood. So until there's a shedding of blood, then the covenant isn't very strong. Okay? There has to be a shedding of blood. Well, we read about this in Hebrews chapter 9. Okay? In Hebrews chapter 9, it says, for where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. Okay? For a testament is of force after men are dead, otherwise there is no strength at all while the testator liveth. Okay? Now we all know this was Christ the first time. But remember, this is after the Gentile age we're talking about. And I'm going to show it to you because remember what we talked about in the beginning. We've shared on it many times, is the understanding of the words. When you have something like this, which is this is eSword, this program I use. I think it's maybe a few dollars a year. I got it back when it was free. And so, but it's not expensive. I don't have any promotion, nothing with it. I don't get paid from them. But I recommend everybody get a program like this or this one. This one's my favorite. You see the descriptions? You see how you get the Strong's Concordance? You can get these words and you could track the words to see their root words and where they come from. We've explained this and we've been able to prove this over the years as well. That just like we said earlier, not only were the writers of the 66 books led by the Spirit, but so were those who were led to bring them into chapters and into verses. And so were those who agreed and decided on which words recommended the description of these things. We've shared in the past how you can go into the word woman in anywhere in Scripture, and you have five, I believe at least five in the Old Testament, different explanations or understandings of what woman means. It could mean a bride or a wife. It could mean a harlot. It could mean, all varieties of things. It could mean wife. Okay? And there are reasons and purposes to all of them. And that's the same thing you're going to witness right here as we get into this. When you understand the revelation of prophecy, you're going to see why it says what it says. Because this is something that's hard to accept for most people. But when you understand that he came the first time for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, you see, he didn't come for Judah. He didn't say Judah. He didn't say, I've come for the lost sheep of Israel and of the house of Judah. And you might say, oh, he doesn't have to say that. Oh, really? Oh, really? Then why in Jeremiah 31 did he say when he makes a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah? You see, I think it's Matthew 17 or 15 or something like that, when he says, I have not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Do you know why he didn't come for those who were in Christ? Because those who are in Christ are already in him. They're gone. He doesn't need to come for those who are saved. They're going to be taken out. He's going to be coming for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then what happens? When the end of seals happens and the lost sheep of the house of Israel with the Gentiles that are grafted in is over, you see? Watch this. Let me prove this to you briefly. In Romans chapter 9, I believe it's in chapter 9. Okay? When he says right here, starting in, let's go to verse 24. Even us, whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles, as he saith in Hosea, okay? It's Hosea. As he says in Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not my beloved. You see that? That's the Gentiles. But it's the Gentiles grafted into the house of Israel. And Hosea, as we showed, has 14 chapters to the 14 years, you see, to the Gentiles with the house of Israel, because there are still corners and gleanings right to the very end. And Zechariah is to the house of Judah. So look at what happens when we go to Hosea chapter 1. Listen to what the Father says. Verse 2, Hosea 1. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea, and the Lord, Father, said unto Hosea, which is a picture of Christ, okay? Listen what it says, deliverer, Yeshua, right? Yeshua, deliverer, savior, get victory. It says, go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms. What is that saying? It's a Gentile bride. Just like we saw in Romans chapter 9. In Hosea, when he says, they are not my children, she is not my, they will be my children, and she will be my beloved. That's the pre-trib. And it's talking about it as what? As Gentiles. So when the house of Israel and the Gentiles that are grafted in, when that age comes to an end, which is the end of seals, then he's going to turn his attention back to Judah. Okay, to the Jewish people. And he's making this new covenant for the remnant of the house of Israel, natural Israel, and it will also then include with the house of Judah. This is why what we're seeing here, we know and can prove it out scripturally that there is something else that's going to happen past tense, which the Jews have said many times, and they debate 50-50 whether or not he would die or how he would die. But when you realize that it is Messiah, coming again and makes a new covenant, and that whenever there's a covenant, the testator has to die. The one who's making this covenant must die for it to have strength. Okay? And it says, and amongst and almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to this, because remember, I was just talking about this word, the word definitions. Okay, how important it is with these Strong's Concordance words and what they're telling us. So now listen to what it says in verse 26 of Hebrews 9. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. You see, it's saying that, there's not that he suffered often, but guess what? 2 times isn't often. Okay? So listen what it says. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Now you think, yeah, but this is all what Jesus already did. I agree with you. Remember, was, is to come. Okay? There are 3 pictures, just because this is what took place in the is. Okay? So what ends up happening, this is how it plays out. We see this in Ecclesiastes 1:9. What was, which is creation until Christ, is the was. The Old Testament, the was. Shall be. That's the is to come. Okay? That's the is to come of the end of days. And then it says, and what is, which is from Christ until the moment of the pre-trib, is the is that we're living in. It says, shall be. Okay? Which is means within the Old Testament, prophetic pictures of events that will play again in the end of days, and things from Christ until the pre-trib, in the is of life that we're living, will play out again in a typology in the end of days. What was, shall be. What is, shall be. Okay? That it tells us that everywhere. So watch what ends up happening here. When we read this, let's go have a careful look at it, and this is going to make you say, whoa. Okay? When you understand the importance of the word definitions. Jews, rabbis talk about this all the time. When you understand the definition of the words. In fact, let me show you this little side note. I haven't talked about this in a while. In verse 10, it says, which stood only in meats and drinks and diverse washings and cardinal ordinances imposed on them, listen to this, until the time of Reformation. You see what's going on? So it's talking about what the Jews did, right? And their sacrifices and all these things they did to follow the law. Okay? It says, which stood only in meats and in drinks and diverse washings and cardinal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. Well, do you know when the time of Reformation is prophetically in the end of days? It's the end of seals. Okay? Imposed on them until the time of Reformation. So what does that mean, until the time of Reformation? When you understand that it's a prophetic picture of when the Lord comes at the end of the 6th year of seals, it means what? That these things that were imposed on them, that these things of the law that they did and that they've been failing at because they didn't recognize Christ, because they were blinded, as he tells us, right? They were blinded for the most part. These things that they do, these ordinances and so forth that they do, will be imposed on them until he comes at the end of seals. At which point, what do we know? Christ has become the high priest and king. He becomes now high priest and king at the end of seals, when he comes at the end of days Reformation, which will be the end of the Gentile age, and he will turn his attention back to them. And when he does, he's going to do it with a new covenant. Watch this. See this word Reformation? The Messianic restoration? Watch this. Remember this in the Ministry Revealed book? You have the typology of 7 churches in the Old Testament that played out over a couple thousand years. You have the is of from Christ until the end of the Laodicean age, which we're in right now, right here, the end of the Laodicean age. And this was about 2,000 years. When this is all over, it will start again at the moment of the pre-trib, and the 7 churches will play out over again, but instead over 2,000 years and 2,000 years, they will play out over 50 days and 14 years, because it's going to be that intense and chaotic in the end of days. People have no idea what's coming. When World War III is called the beginning of tribulation, people have no idea what's coming. It is the necessity of a remnant to remain with the revelation of the Lord, that the Lord will confirm and fill them with the Spirit to make them, to help them go out and teach the people in the end of days. You see, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about the Reformation. So what do we know? Ephesus, at the moment of the pre-trib, you have Ephesus that represents the start of the 50 days. Smyrna is a picture of the Lord coming after the 7-day wedding and the 40 days beginning. Then you get to Pergamum. Pergamum is about the end of World War III, about 2 years into tribulation, which is in the 3rd year from sowing and reaping, okay? But 2 years once the 14 years begins. This is when the beast gets his power. This is when they flee into the wilderness in Mark's discourse. And then what happens? When the wilderness period is over, it's at the coming of the Lord at the end of seals, which is what you read in Thyatira. At the end of Thyatira is the coming of the Lord with heavenly Mount Zion to defeat the enemies. And then Sardis is like a picture of the beginning of the 7th year of seals. And what did it relate to in the Old Testament? The period of Israel's kings. Remember, he said, I've come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And now you've got a period of Israel's kings. You get it? What was it in the is? Reformation. You can't make this stuff up. This is now the Lord here. It's the messianic age of the Reformation of the Lord, which in the is of history was at the Reformation of the church, which was in the Old Testament the period of Israel's kings, and which in the is to come is going to be the Lord when he's now ruling from heavenly Mount Zion as high priest and king at what? The messianic restoration. Isn't that crazy? Beautiful how it happens, right? It's absolutely incredible. But now let me finish this point of what we're talking about in Hebrews. That was to help you see and visualize a little bit better this period of that end of the 6th year of seals and the start of that 7th year, that Reformation period, the period of Israel's kings. How many times have we done teachings that explain this period of Israel's kings, which is the beginning of the Lord reigning, right? When he's there on heavenly Mount Zion, him and the other witness, right? Him and the Messiah ben David, the Zerubbabel type, who's overseeing the rebuilding of the temple, while the Lord is with the 144,000 who are going out. It's the Reformation time. It's literally the exact same period that you're seeing here when it's saying, okay, these things have now happened. Now watch this. Where were we? Right here. Hebrews 9:26. For then must he have often suffered since the foundation of the world, but now, once in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sin by sacrifice of himself. Again, of course, this relates to when Christ was here the first time. And if you don't have a Strong's Concordance at your fingertips to go and check these things for yourself, then you're only going to be a baby reader of Scripture. You're only going to be like a child because you're only reading surface. You're not reading the deeper layers of the Scriptures. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But there's reward for diligently seeking and searching, right? We saw that with Enoch. Well, listen to this. Okay? In the end of the world. Doesn't that sound strange to you? It sounds strange to me. Years before I started to get the revelation that started 8.5 years ago. Why would it say end of the world when it was 2,000 years ago? Certainly doesn't sound like the end of the world to me. You see? So, is it? We know this was Christ, so how could that have been a relation to the end of the world when the Lord came 2,000 years ago and did these things? What would be, why did they do this writing? Why did they term it the end of the world when it was so long ago? Because prophecy is laced into all of it. Let me prove it to you. In the end of the world, okay? The end of the world. Let's look at the word end. Now, the word end is in many places in the New Testament, of course. But look at this one. Only 6 times. Means entire completion, to complete entirely, finish, fulfill. Okay? Let's look at that closer. Finish, end, finish, fulfill. Okay? So you could say that he fulfilled it when he did it. Except that's not what it's telling us. It's saying in the end of the world he did this. Though it was 2,000 years ago. And though we know it was for what he did 2,000 years ago, why did it use this wording? Well, I'm going to show you why it used this wording. Because this wording in the Greek 4930 is going to blow your mind. This Greek 4930 is used one time here in Hebrews 9:26, and let me show you a little side note of this, which is directly connected to it. But if we go to Daniel chapter 12, remember what the other word was in here too? To finish, to fulfill. Okay, watch this. If we come to Daniel 12:7, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, and when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and a half a time, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Okay? Shall be finished. So you've got a connection to finish or fulfilled being at the end of what? For those that have been following, you know that this is at the end of the 6th year of trumpets, which is the 13th year total of the 14 years of tribulation, 7 years of seals, 6 years of trumpets, and there's one more year left, which you guys know is as it was in the days of Noah. Okay? So there's that word finished, which we know brings us to what? The end of 13 years, the start of the 14th year, when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives after something has happened. Well, what if we go look to see where the Greek word 4930 shows up in the New Testament? Ready for this? Matthew 28, Matthew 24. Look at that. Only in the book of Matthew. That should start to raise suspicion to you right away. Because when you know the differences between Luke, Mark, and Matthew and who they're speaking to, and something is only found in the Gospel of Matthew, do you know that the word kingdom or the phrase kingdom of heaven is only found in the Gospel of Matthew? Of course it is, because theirs is the promise of their kingdom of heaven, the millennial reign on earth. That's why it's only found in the Gospel of Matthew. So why do you think the end of the world, this word end, is only found in the Gospel of Matthew with one reference from Hebrews? Well, look at what it is. The end of the world, the end of the world, this world, the end of the world, the end of the world, the end of the world. Do you see the reference? It's literally the end of the world. Let me prove it to you. Matthew chapter 24. What do we know about Matthew chapter 24, brothers and sisters? Right? What does it say? What will be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? For those that don't know it, watch this. You see, it's having these Strong's concordance numbers at your fingertips, because that word for coming, for those that hadn't seen this before, this word for coming right here, 39:52 in the Greek is only found in the Gospel of, yes, you guessed it, is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. And do you know why it's only found in the Gospel of Matthew, and not only just in the Gospel of Matthew out of all the Gospels, but only in chapter 24? Is because it's directly related to them asking when he's going to return feet down on the Mount of Olives. This is the coming. See, so what shall be the sign of thy coming? This is when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, and of the end, there it is, and of the end of the world. You notice something? Why on earth is the word end in Hebrews chapter 9 about the one who dies as the testator, talking about Christ who did it 2,000 years ago, telling us in a prophetic screaming, really, by putting the end of the world there and relating us to the book of Matthew, literally telling us about the coming of the Lord when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. Isn't that crazy? That's literally where the word is. It's all about the timing of the coming of the Lord, feet down on the Mount of Olives. Do you know when this happens? Immediately after his resurrection. Okay? Immediately after the tribulation of those days. There's the two witnesses resurrect, which we'll talk about briefly, and immediately after he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. You know where the other one is? Watch this. For those who have been following this ministry for a while, we've done this breakdown too of Luke, Mark, Matthew in the last chapter, the resurrection story. In fact, if you go into the intro series, I believe it's still in there, where you see a picture of the three times that we're talking about, right? Everything is in threes: Luke, Mark, Matthew. You can go to the resurrection story of Luke, Mark, Matthew and see the three comings of the Lord prophetically revealed in their differences in the wording that takes place. And what do we see here? This Matthew 28, this Great Commission that everybody loves to talk about, but they confuse it. You see, look at what it says in Matthew 28, verse 18. And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Do you know where you read this? At the seventh trumpet. That's when he returns. That's his power that he gets when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. In the physical and in the spiritual, everything is now his. Okay? And it says, go ye therefore and teach all nations. Notice that there's no preaching. This is something we've done in our old teachings about this. Okay? There's no preaching. But if you go to Mark and you go to Luke, it both has preaching in it. Only in the book of Matthew, at the end of it, which is the post-trib return of the Lord feet down, are we seeing that it says, go ye therefore and teach all nations. No preaching anymore. Why? Because the whole world will have seen him come as lightning from one end unto the other. The mystery shall be finished. You see? The mystery will be finished because the whole world will see him coming as lightning. And then it says, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. You see, this is post-trib baptizing. Everybody since Christ till now is supposed to be baptized, as Acts chapter 2, I think verse 35 or 38 talks about, in Jesus' name for the remission of sins and receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost. That's the way we're supposed to be baptized. If you haven't been baptized that way, I would recommend just doing it again. You might be fine in your heart and everything might be okay. That's fine. But if you know the difference, then maybe you should do it. Okay? Now listen to how this ends. There's a reason why I'm bringing it up here. It says in verse 20, the end of Matthew, teaching them to observe all things I have commanded you. Okay? What are they going to be teaching to observe? They're going to be going out during the millennial reign. Okay? The heads of the tribes that represent the gates during the millennial reign that people will enter through to come and worship the Lord. They're going to need to know to understand how to come and worship the Lord at his feasts. That's what this is saying. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. There it is. Do you think it's just by chance that it's only in the Gospel of Matthew? And that not only because it's in the Gospel of Matthew, but that it's in Matthew 24 at the coming of the Lord? And that it's in Matthew 28 where we have prophetically taught on for like 8 years almost that this is the Lord at the end having returned feet down, and he's with them until the end of the world because he's here feet down and he's with them until the end of the millennial reign. That's what this end is all about. You see? So now is it hard to see? Is it hard to understand what's being said here when it says that he suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Why is he he's defeated sin already? Why is this happening? Because there's still another sacrifice, right? Don't you guys know this? Right? Especially if you're newer, you may not have heard about this before, and this is a lot to take in. That's why I told you, pause and go watch some of the other stuff, right? But if you go to Leviticus chapter 1, you find out that there are 3 sacrifices. There it is again, right? 3. And if you read them in reverse, you see when Christ was born and they sacrificed the turtle doves, right? And then Christ became the sacrifice of the lamb, right, without blemish. Well, do you know that there's still one more sacrifice? There's the one for atonement, right? That is the killing of the bullock, the killing of the ox for the priests. The killing of the ox for the priests? Wait, when Jesus comes at the end of seals, and he's here until the end of trumpets, and something has to happen to him so that there's a shedding of blood, isn't he the ox because he's representing of Ephraim? He's the representation of the ox? Ding, ding, ding. Pretty crazy, right? Absolutely wild to see how it all plays out. Now, if this is true, then where do we see the evidence of him having to do this again? Well, don't forget what Jesus said in Revelation chapter 3 at the Laodicean age. Remember what happens with the Laodicean age? In the Laodicean age, we're in it right now, but when the pre-trib happens, the 7 churches will play out again. And what ends up happening? He is here, right, from the end of the 6th year of seals, so the 7th year of seals, through to mid-trumpets, it's the time of Israel's kings. He's high priest and king. The 144,000 of the Church of Philadelphia are going out and preaching. The Lord is with them. And then there's the defeating comes. Then Satan is cast down, the pit is open, the beast comes back, and the Laodicean age starts. You see that? In the Laodicean age. So it will then be the end of days, Laodicean age, from mid-trumpets until what? The end of the 13th year, and the Lord returning feet down. So if you understand where Laodicea starts again, which is at mid-trumpets till the end of trumpets, then look at what Jesus says he is. So from that, remember what I'm saying. Look at carefully. Okay? This is when the 144,000 go out. Okay? Then all of a sudden, the beast, the period of Israel's removal, because the beast, Satan, has been cast down, and the pit is open. This is why you see the apostasy taking place in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Because the pit has been opened. Satan was cast down, the pit has been opened, the beast comes back up. All 3 of them are there now. There's Satan, the beast, and the false prophet. It's the Laodicean age again. When does this begin? At mid-trumpets. About 10.5 years into tribulation. There was 3.5 years approximately of rebuilding the city streets and the temple. And then this is the cutting off. This is now when war breaks out against the two witnesses. And it's the Laodicean age. And what does the Lord call himself? In Laodicea, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, and unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, the faithful, and listen carefully, the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. So if anybody wonders, when we say Genesis 1 verse 1, in the beginning God created, the word beginning is Christ. In Christ, God created. In Christ, God the Father created, meaning he gave it all to Christ, who is the beginning, and he created everything. And look at what it says. Jesus is the true witness right at the time when the two witnesses connected to the Laodicean age of the end of days, at mid-trumpets, it's the Laodicean age again. The beast has come back. Satan's been cast down. The pit has been opened. And now war breaks out against the two witnesses. And Laodicean church begins with Jesus proclaiming he is the true witness. So he is the true witness, and he is the beginning of the creation of God. Pretty wild, right? But the focus here we're talking about is he even calls himself the true witness. He's calling himself the true witness at this exact same time of the Laodicean age when the apostasy happens and the war breaks out against the two witnesses. It's wild. It's so wild. All you got to do is track it, right? Track it. So now when we go to Revelation chapter 11, it says, who are the two witnesses, right? So it says, these are the two olive trees, the two candlesticks. When people try to understand, well, who are they? You know, they like to go to Moses and Elijah. But what they fail to understand is because they're only seeing in a 7-year mindset. When you understand it is a 14-year mindset and 2 sets of 7, the first picture of the two witnesses of Moses and Elijah are the time of seals. The two witnesses in trumpets are the references to the two olive trees and the two candlesticks that everybody talks about. And that's when you come to Zechariah chapter 4, when it talks about the two olive sticks, the two olive trees and the candlesticks, calling them the two anointed ones. And you find out from Zechariah chapter 4 going into 6 that in chapter 6, the two that are going to be ruling between the rule is going to be between them both is the Zerubbabel, who is the branch. Okay, he is the Messiah ben David, who is the branch, the one who is a person alive on the earth right now. And then the other one, who is the Joshua type, who is the high priest and king. The high priest and king Joshua type is the one who is higher than the Messiah ben David, the Zerubbabel type, because the high priest and king, remember, he's coming as Melchizedek, high priest and king. That is the one who has the direct connection, the direct access to the Father. You see, he is the one that's the greater. And it says, but the rule will be between them both. And they're the two anointed ones. So who are they? They're the Messiah ben David and Messiah ben Joseph or / Ephraim, who are the two at the end, which the Lord himself said he is the true witness. Now when we go to Matthew chapter 27, we see right here in verse 63, and we've seen this in other places. In fact, here's a great picture of it. It relates to the differences between the story of Luke, Mark, and Matthew in the Transfiguration. And all of you guys know, after 6 days is the after 6 years of trumpets in Matthew's. And when you read about it in verse 9, it says, tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. Risen again from the dead. You see, we could say risen again, and you could say the Lord rose from the dead. But this is saying rising again from the dead. Okay? That is not the same. It's telling you to rise up again, to stand up again, and it's from the dead. Hello. Do you know that this variation, this wording is only, of course, found in Matthew's gospel? Okay? Makes sense, right? Well, do you know that only in Matthew's gospel do you read that they say that Jesus would rise again after 3 days? Do you know that he couldn't have rose after 3 days? You know what after 3 days means? Sometime in the fourth day. And if it goes from evening to evening, then it would be about 3.5 days, because he would resurrect at sunrise, right? Or right near sunrise. This is where you find after 3 days. Now, why the after 3 days? Because because they read, like the church, from the Gospel of Matthew all the time, they believe that it has to be after 3 days and 3 nights, like the story of Jonah, which, by the way, the one in Luke is different, the one in Mark is different, the one in Matthew is different, and the one in Matthew is about the 3 days and 3 nights. You see, we've been lied to make it fit to say that any portion of a day is a day and a night that counts. But that's not what it says. Because if you go to Luke's gospel, and you go to chapter 24 at the resurrection of Jesus, and they went in to the sepulcher, and the angels were there, and he says, and he told you guys that on the third day he would rise. On the third day. This says after 3 days. How do you reconcile that? Well, when you understand the prophecy, the revelation of the end of days, that he is going to do this again, because he is one of the 2 witnesses, and he is the true witness. Listen to what it says here. This is only found in the Gospel of Matthew as well, okay? At the end of verse 64, it says, so the last error shall be worse than the first. Isn't that crazy? When you understand what this means in the prophetic, it blows your mind. They're telling you that they don't want this last error. If this happens, this last error, which they're calling an error, is going to be worse than what it did for the world when he did it the first time. Isn't that crazy? It's right there in the wording. It's the only time that you have after 3 days, which means sometime in the fourth day. Well, then all we do, let's go back to Revelation chapter 11. What happens to 2 witnesses, which Christ claimed himself at the Laodicean age to be one of the 2 witnesses? Now watch what happens. See right here? When the beast comes out of the bottomless pit, which is at mid-trumpets, when he makes war against them, this is that time times and a half from Daniel chapter 12. Okay, Revelation chapter 12 verse 14, that has an extra year in it because of the additional word and. But this one is the war that breaks out for what Daniel chapter 12 was saying, that it would be for a time, times and a half, which is 2.5 of the final 3.5 years, till he has scattered the power of the holy people. This is the war breaking out against the 2 witnesses at mid-trumpets, 10.5 years, which is the Laodicean age starting over again in the end of days. When the Lord himself said he is one of the witnesses, he is the true witness. And in Matthew, which is pertaining to the time of trumpets, that he would rise again from the dead, that it said in the Gospel of Matthew only, and in Matthew 24, and at the end of Matthew 28, that at the end of the days he would do this. You see, when does this war against the 2 witnesses end? It ends at the end of 2.5 years, when they will have killed the 2 witnesses, of which Christ himself said in the time of Laodicea, he is the true witness. And how long were they dead for? Their bodies lying in the streets? After 3.5 days. How long? 3.5 days. So what would be after 3 days? Sometime in the fourth day, which would be about 3.5 days. They stood up on their feet. In the same hour, there's a great earthquake. And then what? Then the 7th angel sounds. Okay? The 7th angel sounds. What happens when the 7th angel sounds? It says in Revelation 10 verse 7, we mentioned it a little earlier, connected to Daniel chapter 12 verse 7, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery should be finished. Remember Daniel 12? We talked about that finished. You see, as soon as that 7th angel sounds, the mystery is finished. And do you know what happens? You end up back in Matthew chapter 24, which tells us immediately, in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. what ends up happening? It'll be the coming of the Lord, not in. Remember, Strong's Concordance shows us that the word in here is the only one in Matthew, not in Mark, not in Luke, only in Matthew, is on the clouds. This is the coming of the Lord on the clouds of heaven. Okay, go look at the Strong's. It'll say on in the definition. But in Luke and in Mark, it's actually the word in. Okay, it's on the clouds. This is the Lord returning, feet down on the Mount of Olives, being seen from one end unto the other. And it says what? That it will be with the sound of a great trumpet. That is the seventh trumpet sounding when the Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives, immediately after. Okay? Immediately after. When he had been what? Well, the two witnesses, right? When they will have died, and then standing on his feet, they go right up to heaven to be with the Lord. And then what? In the same hour, there's a great earthquake, and then the seventh woe, and that seventh angel sounding is the Lord returning, feet down, as soon as it begins to sound. And it says, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Remember what we said in Matthew chapter 28? That it was at the seventh trumpet when everything becomes the Lord in heaven and on earth. That's when he will be here and everything is now his. You see, when is this timing? It's from the testator having been sacrificed, the blood shedding, and then him returning feet down on the Mount of Olives. Okay? Now, what comes next? What comes next, right? This is, remember, that was a long piece to explain this whole covenant. Because the covenant, even though it's when he makes the covenant doesn't come into full effect, right? Until the sacrifice. So I wanted to bring it from the time of the covenant to the end where that sacrifice is made. And now when you come to Matthew chapter 24, and you see that immediately after the tribulation, at the sound of the seventh trumpet, he's seen coming in the clouds of heaven, which is as lightning from one end unto the other. What ends up happening? That it would be at the day and hour no one knows, which is the Feast of Trumpets, of course. And it would be as it was in the days of Noah. You know why now, don't you? You know why I've been wrapping this back around and taking you through to get to the end, right? I think you do. Because this is the Lord returning on the day and hour no one knows, which is the Feast of Trumpets, which is what we saw in Matthew 17 when he comes after 6 days. So Mark is after 6 days, which is after 6 years of seals, when he returns at the end of the 6th year of seals, right? Well, this is when he returns after 6 days or after 6 years of trumpet judgments, which is when he returns at the start of the 14th year, when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, just like Zechariah chapter 14. When he does, it's going to be the day and hour no one knows, which means it's going to be the Feast of Trumpets. But we didn't see this in Luke's discourse. We didn't see it in Mark's discourse. We only see it in Matthew's discourse. And it says, but as it was in the days of Noah, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Remember this word coming? That's the same one that's only used 4 times in all of the Gospels, only in Matthew 24, which was connected to the end at his coming. Okay? And what do we know about this? Here he is at his coming. It's the days of Noah. So where are we now? We're at the start of the 14th year, the final year of tribulation. The Lord is returned, feet down on the Mount of Olives, on the day and hour no one knows, which is the Feast of Trumpets, to start the 14th year. Well, remember this incredible revelation in the Gospel of Luke? We showed that in Luke's Gospel, there's this incredible mystery in Luke chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. In Luke chapter 1, we've got a teaching on it. You can go dig it up. But it's called Luke in Order, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. In Luke chapter 1, you have a prophetic picture of the pre-trib. Okay, those who are kind of like John the Baptist, who are spirit-filled and so forth. And then you have the 8th day at his circumcision. That's a picture of the 7-day wedding and then the 8th day, and there is a remnant who remained, like John the Baptist, like the Elijah company of the end of days. And then chapter 2 starts. And in chapter 2, you have Christ's birth, which is the beginning of his 40 days, which is when he comes as the white horse rider. Okay? So that's, and it's connected to the picture of his birth. Then you'd go to chapter 3, and it's the end of seals picture of the Lord coming at the end of the 6th year of seals. When you go to chapter 4, it is a picture of the Lord returning feet down on the Mount of Olives, where we're at right now. And in this incredible revelation, we see that he's now coming up against Satan. That's exactly what happens in the 14th year when the beast and the false prophet are taken alive right off the bat and cast into the lake of fire. Then he's got this battle against Satan until Satan is bound. But how does it start? 40 days. You have the 40 days that begins in chapter 4, which we have taught and broken down is the prophetic picture of the final year, starting the 14th year, which would be as it was in the days of Noah. Well, let's go to Genesis 7 now. Okay? So we've done Genesis chapter 5 and 6, and now we're going to go to chapter 7. Okay? Chapter 7 should relate to a post-trib connection to the coming of the Lord. Just like this one was to tabernacles, which relates to the 7 years of trumpets, and then the great 8th day, the Jubilee. So this, as we've noticed with these, aren't specifically pre, mid, and post, like the events of the feasts. This one was the pre-trib, and then it's the events of his coming. Okay? So let's see what chapter 7 of Genesis talks about. And for anybody who's been following, you know exactly what it is, right? It's the story of Noah. Wait, it's the story of Noah. You mean like Matthew 24? Exactly as we have taught in this ministry for years now, that the reason the story of Noah in the synoptic gospels is only found in Matthew in the discourses is because it relates to the final 14th year of the Lord having returned feet down on the Mount of Olives. It's the destruction that is going to come against all of the enemies of the Lord in that final year. And what do we know about the days of Noah? Well, let's go to chapter 7, which is exactly, directly, unequivocally, 100% related to the coming of the Lord at the end of the what? 7 years of trumpets, or in that 7th year of trumpets. It's absolutely wild. Because the days of Noah in chapter 7, following Genesis 5, 6, 7, in a pre, mid, post, or 3 comings of the Lord, is the story of Noah. And the days of Noah, it says in Genesis 7, verse 11, that it was the 2nd month, 17th day of the month, and it started with 40 days and 40 nights. Remember what Luke started with? With the 40 days, that picture of 40 days, or 40 days and 40 nights? Remember what Matthew said? That it would be as it was in the days of Noah, and that it would be at the day and hour no one knows, which is the Feast of Trumpets. And here we have the story of Noah in chapter 7, which is the prophetic picture of the final year of tribulation, of the Lord being here, and it would be as it was in the days of Noah. That is chapter 7. Do you know, and many of you who have watched, who have been following for a while, know this, but remember what I said in the beginning? That what we're seeing, the last 2 sets of 7, are the final 2 sevens of the 7 times 7 before this being the 49th year. So the 14th year, in what we talk about here in this ministry, the 14th year is actually the final 7. So it's the 49th year before the Jubilee. Okay? So this 14th year is the 49th year. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. in Leviticus 25, verse 8, 7 times 7 years, even Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. But only in the 49th year, only the 49th year, has an extra 10 days added to it. Look at verse 9. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. So what does that mean? The 49th year, so out of all of the years, they're all regular year lengths, but the 49th final year is an extra 10 days long, and it's to atonement, which means it had to go from the Feast of Trumpets to the Feast of Trumpets. And the final 49th is Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets plus 10 more days. Well, that means if Matthew 24 was telling us that it was the day and hour Noah knows, Feast of Trumpets, and it would be as it was in the days of Noah at the coming of the Lord, which is his return, feet down on the Mount of Olives. And we can go to the 3rd chapter in this prophetic picture of 3 times, and we go to chapter 7, and it's literally the story of the beginning of the 14th year or the 49th year. We end up with the story of Noah. And it has to be 1 year and 10 days long. Well, do you know what happens later in Luke chapter 4? After this picture of him defeating the Satan, and then this prophetic typology of Satan then being bound, then we come to Luke chapter 4 in verse 17 through 19, and it's when Jesus reads from the book of Isaiah. And when he reads from the book of Isaiah, he's reading the part of to preach the right here. Let me read verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to send me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, and to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Those of you that know, he is reading from the book of Isaiah, chapter 61, which is the proclamation of the Jubilee. Do you see what's happening here? In Luke, in order, we have this 40 days, which is the Noah story, starting at his return on the day and hour no one knows. And he's going up against Satan in Luke, in order, in chapter 4, the picture of his return when he defeats Satan. And it starts with the 40 days, just like the days of Noah did, which equaled 1 year and 10 days. And in the story of Luke, at the end, after he's defeated Satan, we get the picture of the great 8th day, which is the story of the Jubilee. What is the great 8th day, right? What ends up happening? Well, we go to the end of the story in Genesis chapter 8. So you've got the picture of the final year as it was in the days of Noah happening in chapter 7. And in chapter 8, which is a picture of what? It is a picture of the great 8th day of tabernacles. Remember, we're now in the 7 years of trumpets. You see, what were the first? These were the 6 days to 6 years of Passover, unleavened bread. And in the 7th day, which is the 7th year prophetically, was the solemn assembly. But in tabernacles, it's 7 days as 7 years of tabernacles, and the solemn assembly is the great 8th day, which prophetically is the Jubilee. The final 14 years, the 15th year is the Jubilee. See, 77777, that's the 49th year. This is the Jubilee. So the Lord is coming at the 49th year, which would be as it was in the days of Noah. Chapter 7 has the story of the beginning of the final 14th year, which is the 49th, which is 1 year and 10 days long, so that the Jubilee could be announced at the Day of Atonement. And it just so happens that when you go to chapter 8, you get the end of the story in chapter 8, which would be a picture of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of tabernacles, and the 8th day of tabernacles. Here we are in Genesis chapter 8, and it says, and it came to pass Where is it? In verse 14 of Genesis 8, and in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. This is 1 year and 10 days later from when it began. And it's telling us this in chapter 8, which is the declaration and the timing of the prophetic 8th great day, which is the Jubilee that is called the 8th day of Tabernacles. Do you understand how crazy this is? Let me show this to you. In Leviticus chapter 23, in the Feast of Tabernacles, it says the Feast of Tabernacles is 7 days. Okay? So there is no solemn assembly in the 7th day or on the 7th day like there is with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Just like the way Seals plays out. 6 years, and then the 7th is the mid-trib great multitude solemn assembly. But in Tabernacles, they're not brought back for the solemn assembly in the 7th year of trumpets, because the Lord is defeating them in the 1 year and 10 day event as the days of Noah. So it's not until the 8th day that you get a solemn assembly, or until the 8th year of Tabernacles that you get a solemn assembly, which is the 8th day when you have the solemn assembly in Tabernacles, and it's called the Great 8th Day, is what the Jews call it. It is a picture of the Jubilee. It's all falling in order. And you know what happens? So we saw that it was Feast of Weeks in the book of John in chapter 5. We see that it was Passover in chapter 6. And in chapter 7, it's about the Feast of Tabernacles. And the 7 years of trumpets are the Feast of Tabernacles in years. And what happens at the end? Okay? Deuteronomy 16. The final feast is the Feast of Tabernacles. The 7 days as 7 years. And what happens when we go later in the book of John in chapter 7? After the 7 days of Tabernacles, what do you have? In verse 37, in the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood up and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Do you know why it's this living water flowing out from the Lord at this point, which is the 8th day? It's because it is the year of the Jubilee. Do you know what happens in the Jubilee year, brothers and sisters? Yes, you do. Remember our book of Ezekiel, in the chapters to years of Ezekiel? So Ezekiel, you'll see here, has chapters to years, but they're not sowing and reaping years. They're from spring to spring. And in spring to spring, we get to Ezekiel 47 in the chapters to years, which equals in the 14th year from spring to spring, which in a sowing to reaping will be the beginning of the Jubilee. You see that? There is a sowing and reaping count, and there is a year count, spring to spring, and Ezekiel's is spring to spring. Sowing and reaping, Leviticus is the sowing and reaping on this side. There's your beginning of the Jubilee. And Ezekiel chapter 49 says, behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward. And if you go and read it, it's all of the flowing of the water going out and replenishing and renewing the earth. And you have the exact same conversation taking place here. I hope you guys saw this. Everything is in order. And the deeper you go, the deeper you study the revelation of the differences in the Gospels, the revelation of the years, the big picture of 777, but with the focus of the end of 7/7 and the final 15th of the Jubilee. The deeper you go and you study out the differences within the Gospels, you find these incredibly wild pieces of revelation, like we did in John 5, 6, 7. And again, with our brother Jake, who saw both in 5, 6, and 7 of Genesis. And though Genesis 8 is prophetically a picture of the 14 years beginning, which we've broken down and explained a lot as well, it's also at the end of the 7 a picture of the great 8th day, which is the final end of the 14th year and the sounding of the Jubilee on the 10th day. So the days of Noah. I mean, I remember that revelation too. That one blew me away. The days of Noah are only in Matthew at the end of his discourse, going in from the end of 24, and then what happens in the start of chapter 25 is at the end of the 14th year. Okay? But only there is because the days of Noah, and it representing the final 49th year, the 14th year is the 49th year. And when you realize that it's there for the days of Noah because there's an extra 10 days, and it's the proclamation of the Jubilee, that was another mind blower. So you see what we've been able to incorporate into this? We're able to incorporate the chapters to years, this new incredible mystery of the 3 times within both, the Gospel of Luke in order with chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, the discourses, the creation story, the John to Genesis connections, the Lord doing it again, and its connection to Matthew and to the tribulation time, over and over and over and over. If this wasn't possible, if this wasn't true, how on earth can I still be doing this after 8.5 years, showing it out and proving it out over and over and over again? Do you understand that the Lord isn't giving us all of these revelations that are showing the same points, proving out the same things, just for the heck of it? This is a preparing of a people. But beyond the preparing of the people, which is key, is there are insights. There are insights into what it's saying in 5 in relation to the end of John compared to what it's saying in Genesis. So we have Enoch and we have a 365. There's clues in there for us. In John, we have this mystery feast, which is this connection to Feast of Weeks. When you go in all of this storyline and you go from chapter 8 to the end, you get this chapter 8, this connection, which is to the woman caught in adultery, which is a picture of Ruth, which is a picture of Hosea, chapter 1, go get your bride of whoredom. There's all of these clues that we get these revelations over the years in studying different parts and different pieces, that we know the Son of Man for 40 days. We understand the pre-trib is connected to the Feast of Weeks. We know that it has to come before the rest of these things play out. We understand the 6 years to the 7th year of seals. We understand the 7 years of trumpets to the 8th year of trumpets as the Jubilee. All of these things, all of these parts and all of these pieces have revealed themselves in a piece here and a piece there and a piece here and a piece there. And then the books open. And then the books give us greatest insight and greater depth of understanding. And we can go into them and pick out these revelations that are within them that give us more clarity to the events that will take place in the end, giving us a detail that we continue to build on and build on. So we get a deeper, detailed description in the diligent seeking of the Lord in His Word, which He is the Word. We get a diligent seeking and get greater and greater detail to help us better understand the events that will be taking place. Now, why do you think that would happen? Why do you think it's important? Because there's a people being prepared. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point? If all the rest of the world is confused about prophecy, and there's a group that's been revealed in all of this magnificence of the revelation of the mysteries of the Word, only for all of them to be taken pre-trib and the rest of the world to be left with confusion again? It makes zero sense. As in heaven, so on the earth. So awesome. Thank you, Jake, for sharing the insight on that as well. God is good, brothers and sisters. It is so incredible. I pray this has blessed you. I pray that it continues to give you strength and that everybody continues to diligently seek and search. And we will continue this no matter how long it takes. And we will continue to reach and pray that the Lord will continue to send others to hear and to receive as well. I love you. God bless you. God bless your families. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.